Hey guys, so I'm reading from Healing the Child Within. I'm just reading a small part, the last part, on realizing serenity. As we become more familiar with being our observer self and with the healing power of spirituality, we can begin to construct a possible path to realizing serenity, inner peace, and happiness. I have consented the following description from Alcoholism and Spirituality, where each is discussed in more detail. Some possible paths to serenity. Number 1, we are ignorant of our journey. We are limited because of humility. We can study universal laws, approximate them, and surrender to our lack of ultimate knowledge. Given these limitations, sages over the centuries describe something like the following. Number 2, higher power is in each of us, and we are in higher power. 3, we can view our reality as hierarchy of levels of awareness, consciousness, or being. 4, we are going home. We are home already always. Home on this earth is being all levels of our awareness or consciousness in our own unique fashion. 5, there will be conflict going home, melodrama, cosmic drama. The conflict or creative tension is useful to us in some way, probably as a way home. 6, we have a choice. We can use our bodies, ego/minds, and our relationships on this earth to reinforce our separation and our suffering, or we can use them as vehicles for our soul, spirit, or higher power self to return home and to celebrate that return. Higher power home is love. Love is perhaps the most useful way we know higher power. 8, we can remove the blocks to realizing our higher power by experiencing, including living in the now, remembering, forgiving, and surrendering. These 5 realizations can be viewed as being ultimately the same. Regular spiritual practices help us with this realization. Okay, 9, separation, suffering, and evil are the absence of realizing love and are therefore ultimately illusions. They are also manifestations of our searching for love, wholeness, and home. The evil or darkness is thus ultimately in the service of the light, because the light is more powerful. 10, we create our own story by our beliefs, thoughts, and actions. What we believe, think, and feel in our mind and heart, we will generally produce in our experience and our life. What we give, we get. As within, so without. 11, life is a process, force, or flow that lives us. We do not live it. When we surrender to it, flow with its process, and take responsibility for our participation in it, we become co-creators. We can then become free of our suffering that comes with our attachment to resisting flowing with our life. Inner peace or serenity. 12, inner peace or serenity is knowing, practicing, and being all of the above. We ultimately discover that we are already and always serenity and home. Some of these principles are illustrated in the following case history of James, a 42-year-old man who grew up in an alcoholic family, his father being the actively drinking alcoholic and his mother usually assuming the role of a placating codependent. While he showed no manifestations of being alcoholic himself throughout his adult life, James was progressively aware of his inordinate confusion and suffering. He eventually attended Al-Anon and later as adult children of alcoholics self-group meetings for a total of about 6 years with some improvement. He describes the importance and meaning of the spiritual path of the recovery as follows. He says, I went to a lot of Al-Anon and adult children of alcoholic self-help meetings over the years, probably 1 or 2 a week. I really wanted to get well, but I didn't seem to be doing it, although something seemed to keep me motivated to keep attending. I had always thought it was important for me to be strong, which I equated with being independent. This meant to me not to talk much. I believed I could recover on my own without anyone's help. I equated weakness with trusting, surrendering, or being dependent, all of which I saw as being a kind of sickness. I viewed people with these characteristics as being sick, and of course I felt I was healthier or somehow better than they were. Looking back, I see all of this as a probably necessary defense that allowed me to keep attending the meetings without being too overwhelmed by my hidden feelings and the changes I needed to make to recover. During that time, I met a woman at the meetings who was really ignorant and unhappy. She was so obnoxious to me that I tried to avoid being around the meetings she attended. I thought there was no hope for her and that I was certainly better than she was. Then I saw her change. She started to lose her ignorant attitude and became friendlier to me and others. She seemed happy. Well, I hate to admit it, since it was coming from her, who I had never admired, I felt envious of her positive change. I wanted some of that, but she was also now talking about her higher power, and I have always had trouble knowing what that was, even though I had a fairly active religious upbringing. So I began considering that what had happened to her and how I might get some of the peace or happiness. It began to occupy a lot of my thoughts and feelings. I'd been through 40 years of unhappiness and confusion. I began to read some spiritual literature and I began to pray. While I had to pray since I was a child, there was something different about my praying this time. Perhaps I was more sincere and humble. Then, some months later, I experienced a kind of transformation that came on me over about a 2-week period. My own attitude changed and I let go of my resentments of my father and others. Of course, I had done a lot of work in the past on my anger and other feelings, as well as other issues of mine. I began to really believe in a higher power, something I'd never been able to do. I had first reframed health as happiness and then reframed happiness as being associated with needing others and surrendering to them and to the spiritual program. Doing so has made all the difference. James' story illustrates several of the principles of ways to realize serenity. First, he experienced conflict and struggle. He used the struggle in his uncomfortable relationship with the woman he resented as a vehicle for the spiritual evolution and growth. He was aware of his conflict and pain, and he began a regular spiritual practice, prayer. He eventually asked for what he wanted, this time with serenity and humility. And he surrendered to the process of his life. Ultimately, he found what he was seeking, and it was inside himself and nowhere else. The traditional or conventional views of attaining serenity, inner peace, or happiness usually uses one or both of these: seeking pleasure or avoiding pain. In the seeking approach, the ways of focusing on others, which can result in codependence, to being good and waiting to claim our peace later as a reward in heaven. In avoiding pain approach, we may try to ignore pain, detach from it, or stay away from any situation that might bring up conflict for us. We may ask, has either seeking or avoiding ever brought us lasting peace, happiness, or serenity? When I have asked this of others myself, the answer is usually no. In response, one of our choices is to feel hurt and resentful about our instability to be happy, and to project our pain onto others. Or, as a second alternative, we might begin to observe the whole process and begin to observe that self-contradiction of our false self when we are unhappy. As we do so, we can begin to see that happiness is not something that we attain. Rather, happiness, peace, or serenity is our natural state. Beneath all of what we add to our feelings and experience, beneath our self-contradiction, lies serenity itself. To realize serenity, there is nothing we need to do, or even that we can do. If we make all as on our report card, that won't do it. All A's, sorry. It's almost done here. Neither will owning 3 Rolls Royces, nor having $1 million, or marrying a Mrs. or Mr. Right. There is no way that we can earn or achieve happiness, and neither is there any way that we can deserve it. Rather, it is ours inherently, already and always. For adult children of trauma, accepting this idea that we are internally happy may be difficult. If that is so, I think I can understand. As we heal our child within, this realization that we are already and always happy becomes easier and easier. I have found that doing a daily spiritual practice such as meditation or prayer and reading spiritual literature has been helpful in realizing my own serenity. Some readers may be skeptical about this concept of spirituality. Some may be confused. Others may not believe any of it and may even feel like this author sure has lost it now. By contrast, others may find some solace in reading it, and still others may identify a lot of useful material here. Whatever your reaction, I invite you to follow your reactions and instincts. Reflect upon it, talk about it whenever you may sense that is appropriate. Use what you can and leave the rest. Spirituality has worked for me, and I have seen it work for hundreds of others in healing their child within. Then they just have an appendix here at the back. It says, a note on recovery methods. So part of the program, treatment of any active addiction, compulsion, or attachment, self-help group attendance, using a sponsor and working the 12 steps or similar concepts of recovery, educating about the condition and about recovery techniques, residential trauma treatment, brief and intensive as desired or recommended, individual counseling or psychotherapy as indicated. I believe that consideration of all these as a part of a holistic physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual recovery program that is ongoing. Some advantages of group therapy for adult children. Number 1, the group member has several therapists instead of just one. Number 2, the group recreates many aspects of their family and thereby provides them a vehicle to work through their emotional ties, conflicts, and struggles. 3, the person gets to see recovery modeled in several stages. Especially motivating and healing is the ability to see people come into the group and make definitive and at times dramatic positive changes in their lives and in their own child within. 4, with appropriately trained and skilled group leaders, the group is able to work on specific issues that span the range of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual recovery. 5, the well-known advantages of group therapy in general, such as the ability to obtain identification, validation, feedback, appropriate but not abusive confrontation, support, and the many other useful factors and dynamics in group therapy. Developing enough skills and momentum of self-healing to overcome and replace the negative conditioning, victim stance, and repetition compulsion, and to discover and heal our child within usually takes from 3 to 5 years or more of working such a full recovery program. Recovery is not an intellectual or rational process, nor is it easy. It is an experimental process consisting of excitement, discouragement, pain, and joy, with all pattern of personal growth over time. Recovery takes great courage. Even though it cannot be explained adequately with the words alone, I have begun to describe this process of healing the child within. To continue the healing, the reader may consider looking at my next book, A Gift to Myself, which is a workbook and guide to achieving many of the specifics of the healing process. Charles Whitefield, Atlanta, Georgia. So, that's it. Healing the Child Within, Discovery and Recovery for Adult Children of Dysfunctional Families. International bestseller author Charles L. Whitefield, MD. Updated version. So I hope you enjoyed all of my reading for this book, and I will see you later in my next video. I love you, and you're good enough. Take care. Have a good day. Bye.